Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Colleges That Change Lives virtual days. Just a couple of announcements before we get started. This is a panel of people presenting about support for LGBTQIA plus students at CTCL schools. We're excited to have you with us. Just a couple of announcements. The Q&A button on your screen, you can see the question and answer button says Q&A. You can click there at any time to ask questions of any of the panelists or presenters. I know that they're eager to hear from you and want to be able to answer your questions. The presentation is here to give you the information that you need as you're conducting your college search. So don't be shy, ask questions away. Your camera and your microphone are turned off so the panelists can't see or hear you. Also, this is just one of many sessions that are happening, so be sure to sign up for additional CTCL sessions. You can do that on the same website where you registered for this one. Also, the presentation is being recorded and will be available in about a week, as are all of the other CTCL presentations, and those will be also available on the same site where you registered. So now I'd like to turn it over to our presenters, and they'll begin their panel. Dalton, take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us today for this presentation. Today, I and my colleagues from Hampshire College and the Evergreen State College will be sharing a little bit of information about support for LGBTQIA+ students at CTCL colleges and universities. And I'm really excited to do this presentation because this is a topic that I think, unfortunately, is all too often overlooked in the admissions process when folks are talking about the different things that schools offer. So as I mentioned, I'm joined today by Breese Dean, who is a Hampshire alum and a behavioral support counselor at Pride House in Northampton, and Wade Arev, Director of Admissions at Evergreen State College, as well as Amira Kaluya. My apologies if I butchered anybody's names, who is the Trans and Queer Initiatives Coordinator at the Evergreen State College. And I'm Dalton Lewis, Associate Director of Admissions at Hampshire College, and I go by he and him pronouns. And what we'll discuss today are first some of our survey results. We did a quick survey to understand the availability of support services for queer and trans students at CTCL colleges. Then I'll pass it over to my colleagues at Evergreen so they can talk about their support services and campus culture for queer and trans students. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about Hampshire College. And then at the end, we will leave time for Q&A. So please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box for now, and we will do our best to get to all of them at the end of the presentation. So as previously mentioned, we conducted a very quick survey with other CTCL colleges and universities, and we just asked one question. Does your institution have an office or officer specifically charged with providing support for LGBTQIA+ students? 27 of 44 CTCL schools responded to our survey, and of these 27, 22 of them do have offices or officers specifically charged with supporting LGBTQIA+ students. About 15% of them responded sort of, and these campuses have their LGBTQIA+ students supported by diversity and inclusion offices, cultural centers, student groups, and faculty. So I think based on this, it's pretty fair to assume that most CTCL colleges and universities do have specific support systems in place for queer and trans students. And those that don't have made sure that other offices on campus are stepping in to help support those students. So with that information in mind, I will pass it off to our colleagues at the Evergreen State College. Take it away.
Thank you so much for joining us again today. My name is Wade. I'm the Director of Admissions, and I will be here to answer any questions around the admissions process and kind of moving through that and what does that actually look like. But I will hand the time over to Amira, who is on the front lines and helping current students on a daily basis, particularly at this point in time, virtually, but also in person when that is available.
Thank you, Wade. Hi, everyone. My name is Amira. and my pronouns are they, them. I work at First Peoples Multicultural Trans and Queer Support Services at Evergreen State College. And I think I just want to share a little bit of what drew me to Evergreen State College. I didn't start there as a student, but I just, felt like there was a lot of unique sort of characteristics about Evergreen, beyond being a school in the middle of a forest. I had a lot of queer and trans friends that attended, worked, and taught at Evergreen. And so it was something that I knew already culture-wise was somewhere that I felt like I could be openly and visibly queer. I also was really envious as someone who went to a conventional sort of undergrad and graduate school experience. I worked for, in terms of my grades, it was based quantitatively rather than an evaluation, and I was really envious of that because I would hear my friends and my colleagues sort of talk about, I did this seminar, and it was just a really, I would say, a different and a unique approach to teaching and learning, as opposed to you go to class, you try and get hit all of the sort of check marks to get an A. And so, and for me, I was really drawn to that kind of learning approach to learning, and how folks could immerse themselves in learning community with the program they're in. And I'm also Filipino, and I think that was also something that really drew me to the office that I worked at, which is First Peoples. I'm not just queer, and I'm not just non-binary. I was also a person of color, a staff of color, and it was great to know that I could work somewhere and do the work that I loved, knowing that the office that I was in had a really deep understanding of intersectionality, and I could bring my full self to work, and I could support LGBTQ students in the same way. Something that I wanted to share as well is that there's about, last year there was about 48 students who were first-time first-year student, 48% of first-time first-year students self-reported that they were identified as gay, lesbian, queer, bisexual, and that that statistics is sort of on the upward slope, which I'm really thrilled about. I like to tell people half of the time the person you're talking to is probably queer, which is an amazing thing to say to to my colleagues, to students I work with. It really, I think for me, was an experience I've not experienced before, especially at the campuses that I had been to, both as a student and as a professional. And a little bit about First Peoples in our LGBTQ programming. So I have a team of 3 student staff, and all 4 of us coordinate LGBTQ centered events and programs. We host, right now we're hosting an online glitter hour every week. It's sort of an online drop-in. Pre-COVID, we were doing a lot of gender affirming clothing swaps. We also host currently healthy relationships for LGBTQ folks. I think as queer and trans folks, it's absolutely imperative that we unlearn all of sort of the unhealthy messages we get from heteronormativity and the patriarchy. And so it's been a really wonderful experience to learn together with students, sort of developing what healthy relationships look like, especially if we're also thinking beyond just romantic relationships. Other things we help folks with is we host the name, gender marker, identity documents, legal clinics. We host Coming Out Day, Trans Day of Remembrance, Lavender Graduation. This year we combined Indigenous Peoples Day and Coming Out Day, and that was a really wonderful sort of intersectional approach to both of those days. I'm really proud and excited to have been part of that planning committee. We also have a lot of students who start student organizations. So past student orgs have been TREX, which stands for Trans resources extravaganza, Triangle Alliance, and there is also like a Queer Straight Alliance. But I would say that every year we have different sort of like LGBTQ centered groups. It is fairly easy to start a student organization. At Evergreen, I think you just like have to find like 4 other people to start like a student org. So super easy, and it's been wonderful to sort of like see the different, not just see like one LGBTQ group, but like multiple LGBTQ student groups sort of like pop up over the 4 years that I've worked here. You can also contact me. My email is on the slide, Kaluya, CALUYAA @evergreen.edu if you have any questions. And I'm just gonna read, next slide, please. One of my staff was supposed to be with me, but they are sick today. So I'm just gonna read a little bit of their, of what they have written about their slide, because I think they're a student and they work with me at First Peoples. And this is what Teddy, who uses they and he pronouns, had to say about Evergreen. Why Evergreen? Teddy said, because Evergreen had a non-traditional interdisciplinary approach to education. And he also said, my whole K through 12 experience was consumed by AP classes and GPAs and letter grades, and I was burnt out and exhausted. And I didn't feel that there were any meaningful connections between what I was learning and the real world. I knew that other queer and trans LGBTQIA folks had gone to Evergreen, and I knew that Olympia was more trans and queer friendly than where I'd grown up. And it was close enough to my family that I could still visit, but far enough away that I felt safe coming out and being my authentic self for the first time. Some of Teddy's experiences, on-campus experiences are, prior to coming to Evergreen, I could count the number of LGBTQIA folks I knew on one hand. Evergreen gave me the opportunity to be around other queer and trans folks, my classmates and peers, and my own residential assistant, RA, my student staff coworkers, faculty, advisors, were also queer. It's such a healing experience to be surrounded by folks who get you on a level that others can't. I had the privilege of serving as a residential assistant or an RA to Rainbow Fort, which is an LGBTQIA plus on-campus housing community, and was responsible for an apartment building full of students, about 25 altogether, and they spent the year facilitating LGBTQIA focused programming. Here are some tips that Teddy had to share in terms of thinking about what to think about before, while applying to colleges. Research the college, what campus supports are in place for LGBTQIA folks. Ask how do you gain access to these supports. Find out if there are specific spaces for queer and trans folks to gather, and what are the experiences of other LGBTQIA plus folks at this college. Another tip that Teddy shared was research the geographical area, find out what off-campus supports are in place for LGBTQIA plus folks, and how do you gain access to these supports. Finally, ask yourself what you need from college and from your classmates, faculty, and community to feel safe, supported, respected, and valued as an LGBTQIA person. And then last part of Teddy's thing is Teddy shared that once in college, find your people, find your space, find your community, and find out if there are any LGBTQIA plus specific places, clubs, offices, or centers. And when you find them, go there, introduce yourself, hang out, and learn more about the resources that you might not know about yet, and meet other queer and trans folks. Yeah, that is all of Teddy's slide and what they had on their notes. And I think that, okay, she's finished in time.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, Amira. I will pass it off to Breeze Dean.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I just forgot. It looks like Teddy also left his email on the slide. Their email is caskey23@evergreen.edu. I can also share our emails on the chat if that is easier, and super encourage folks to contact us. We're super happy to give sort of like our own take about Evergreen and how to get connected to LGBTQ resources. So thanks.
Awesome.
Sorry.
No problem. Thanks again, Amir. Yeah, and like you said, we can definitely share our contact information at the end during the Q&A session as well. Yeah, take it away, Breeze.
Hi, everybody. My name is Breeze. I use they, them pronouns. I started my journey at Hampshire College in fall of 2015, and I graduated in spring of 2019. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what drew me to Hampshire. I did go to a public high school, but I wasn't a super traditional student. I actually wasn't interested in going to college. Wasn't something I wanted to pursue. There was too many filler classes and gen eds compared to what I was actually interested in. I also wasn't into testing culture. I feel like all my friends were taking SAT and ACT classes to boost their scores for applications, and that just never really sat super well with me. So when I heard that Hampshire College is test blind, so they don't ask for or view any of your test scores when you apply, that was a huge plus for me. And then they also don't include testing in their academic evaluations as well. So I felt like I had found an institution that had kind of shared that value with me, which was super important. And then also when I finally took a tour at Hampshire in person, it was really clear how much of a focus there is in terms of their community wellness, supporting individuality and self-expression. And then on the tour, they just kept talking about how important environmental sustainability is, how carefully they source their food and other resources from. And even just by walking around, like I could really tell that it had a very different culture, and that right off the bat, you can just tell they're very supportive of their queer and trans students, and that the students and faculty on campus do feel comfortable being out and expressing themselves how they wish. One of the other super big sellers for me is that Hampshire College is very gender neutral / gender inclusive, however you'd prefer to phrase it. It allows for a lot of privacy in your living situations. It's majority singles. All of the showers are either private locking stalls or in a regular bathroom on an on-campus apartment. I feel like I had heard horror stories of like communal bathrooms in college, and that had made me super nervous. So the fact that Hampshire is so private in their living spaces was another big point for me. And just as a queer non-binary individual, I really don't take for granted that in my 4 years of time there, I was able to consistently live with queer and trans individuals, work at queer and trans organizations, and study queer and trans topics in School of Theory that I'm passionate about. As someone who, again, initially didn't want to go to college, I'm so happy with my choice, and Hampshire's non-traditional community and structure allowed me to really flourish, both personally and academically, and really push myself way further than I thought I was going to be able to go. While I was a student there, I was involved in a lot of organizing, which is very encouraged there. I organized a ton of LGBTQ+ events, mostly as a student worker. I worked at our Wellness Center, Queer Community Alliance Center, Center for Feminisms, and then I also just did work as an independent organizer on campus as well. Some of the projects that I was most pleased with, I was really into conferences. I organized the 2016 to 2020 queer conferences, first and second Trans Symposium, and the 2017 to 2019 Definitions Deaf Studies Conference. And then I'm going to kind of transition into my academic work at Hampshire. One thing that I absolutely love about Hampshire College's classes is that there's a plethora of them that focus on queer and gender studies, or it could be an absolutely completely different topic, and they still manage to intersect it really well into the classes. If you are a Hampshire College student, you're part of what's called the 5 College Consortium, which is a little collective of colleges. It's Hampshire College, Smith College, Mount Holyoke College, Amherst College, and UMass Amherst. And so you can take any classes at any of those 5 colleges, and then, which I'll get to in a little bit with clubs, but you can also go to the other clubs and resources and events, which is super cool. My educational journey definitely started and ended very differently. I entered as an international business and German major, but after working at the Wellness Center, I got really interested in public health and outreach education. And then that kind of shifted my academics towards my Division III project, which is Hampshire College's senior thesis, to focus on outreach education opportunities as tools to positively promote wellness among queer and trans youth, and why having access to outreach education opportunities is so important to them. And so my Division III project was separated into 3 parts. Your Division III is usually not just a paper, not just a presentation. I had one paper that really provided the background on the importance of promoting wellness among queer and trans youth, especially given the adversities they face. I did an original survey that collected data on their experiences in middle and high school as to whether or not they had access to outreach education opportunities and how that impacted their sense of wellness, their sense of community, all that. And then I also organized a youth day conference as part of the queer conference, where it was completely by youth, for youth, with their wants and needs front and center. And then another super cool thing about Hampshire, which I think is very unique to other colleges, is that they do provide a lot of student funding. In my time there, I was awarded many grants that supported internships with the LGBT Center, helped pay for costs for attending LGBT conferences that I couldn't otherwise access, and also funded parts of my Division III project as well. And luckily, I am able to apply all of my work from Hampshire College, from my academics to my work study to my campus organizing experience, into my current job. I am a behavioral support counselor and client rights officer at Pride House, which is a residential program in Northampton for transgender youth ages 11 to 18. We do go a little bit above that too, for youth in the Department of Children and Family Services and foster care system.
Thanks so much, Breeze, and we will come back to Breeze in just a moment. I'm just going to take a quick moment to talk about how support for LGBTQ students is baked into our campus culture at Hampshire. And actually, I may not have mentioned this before, but I'm a Hampshire alum myself, so I'm speaking from firsthand experience as well. And one of the things that I haven't put on this slide, but that's important to remember, is that within Hampshire's community, from students to staff to faculty, there are a lot of queer and trans folks all around campus. So I think, you know, that's one of the ways in which Hampshire is kind of by default a supportive community for folks who are queer or trans. But then in terms of, you know, campus policies, all of our bathrooms on campus are gender neutral, except for team locker rooms, unfortunately. All housing is co-ed unless specifically designated otherwise. And by co-ed, we mean also gender neutral. You know, so there are a few halls that are male identified or female identified only halls, but the vast majority of them are co-ed. And then I think another really important thing to remember is that when introducing yourself at Hampshire, it's a community norm that you introduce your gender pronouns along with your name and what year at Hampshire you're in. And this starts from your very first day at Hampshire during orientation. And it's something that we take seriously. And I think another thing that's nice to add is that it's not just something that you get told to do without any explanation. During orientation, you're actually provided with information about why it's important to use gender pronouns and where that practice comes from. So I think it's an important part of the orientation process and just helps folks feel more welcomed on campus. And speaking of feeling more welcomed, it is very easy to change your preferred name or pronouns in Hampshire's directory and databases. This is important for a lot of trans students who prefer to be called by other names than what it might say on their birth certificate. But it also makes it so that it's much less, or it's much easier to avoid misgendering students. So every student is actually asked to provide their preferred pronouns when they sign up to get on the directory. And then finally, we have a lot of identity-based housing for queer and trans students. We have the Queer Hall, which is in the dorms every year. And in fact, usually there are more than one Queer Hall. There's usually at least 2 of them. And then the mods, which is what we call our on-campus apartments at Hampshire. We have a queer mod and a gender diverse mod in most years. And even beyond that, students are actually able to create mods for groups of students based on other identities that they might have. So for example, there's usually a female identified mod. There is sometimes a CHIPOC, queer and indigenous people of color mod on campus. There's also a student group for them as well. But so it's very easy if you want to live with other folks who identify as queer or trans, it's easy to find housing where you can do that. And speaking of student groups, I will take it back to Breeze for some quick information about the community resources that we have for LGBTQ students on campus.
Right, so I mentioned earlier some about academics and on-campus living at Hampshire, and now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that Hampshire supports queer and trans students and what resources and services they have to offer. In terms of community involvement and organizing, there are so many clubs at Hampshire. Two prominent ones relating to gender and sexuality, though, are the Queer Community Alliance and Sexperts. And as I mentioned before, being part of the 5-college consortium, that means that you can also attend and join other clubs at the other 4 colleges as well. Like for example, UMass Amherst is home to the Stonewall Center, and they're an incredible LGBT resource, and they host really awesome speakers and panels and all that. And something else really cool about if you join clubs like Queer Community Alliance, you can have the ability to travel to both local and national LGBT events, all sorts of different conferences like Creating Change, Trans Wellness Conference, all that. Hampshire also organizes some pretty major events regarding LGBT identities. The 2 biggest ones are 5-College Queer Gender and Sexuality Conference. We've been 11 years strong. We're going to have our 12th annual one this year. It will be virtual due to the state of the world. And we also have the Trans Symposium. And these events are partially organized by student clubs like the Queer Community Alliance, and partially organized by just like independent, passionate, enthusiastic students. Hampshire also offers a really great amount of resources and services. There are 3 on-campus centers that serve LGBT students really well. There's the Queer Community Alliance Center. That's a hangout and study space. They host events. Usually they have recurring game and movie nights. Center for Feminism similarly is also a hangout and study space. They bring in guest speakers and more events. There's the Wellness Center, which I think this is super cool that Hampshire College has this. Our Wellness Center is different from health services. We do have health services, of course, but the Wellness Center focuses on holistic and community wellness, and it offers a huge range of LGBT resources, queer and trans inclusive information and language, and hosts a lot of queer and trans specific programming as well. One of my passion projects when I was a student worker at the Wellness Center was to set up a discrete safer sex supplies delivery and order form. And that's still running today, which is super awesome. And all across campus, you have access to safer sex supplies, gender affirming services, both on and off campus. Health services is super great with it. And for some reason they're not meeting your needs, we are in a really great area to seek resources off campus as well. And then something fun that we have is also GARB, G-A-R-B, Gender Affirming Regalia Box. That is a collection of clothing, makeup, and accessories to increase student access to items that positively impact their gender expression and gender euphoria. And something that's important to remember is if you don't see an event, club, or service at Hampshire College that you think is interested or important, you have the power to create those events and clubs at Hampshire or to advocate for the needs for certain services. I mean, I definitely saw it at my time at Hampshire. I'm sure Dalton did as well. Like in your 4+ years there, like you'll see changes, you'll see new services, new clubs. It's all about what the students are interested in and want to see.
Awesome, and thanks again, Breeze. We still have plenty of time left for Q&A. So I'm gonna go ahead and see if there are any questions that have come up. So actually no questions seem to have been brought up in the Q&A section. So now's the time, participants, if there's anything about this presentation or, just about the Evergreen State College or about Hampshire that you're curious about, feel free to type something into the Q&A box. And I will also get on screen share our contact information so that if you are interested in following up with either of our colleges, you can go ahead and feel free to send us an email or call us. I know you're just blown away by the amount of support that we have at both of our colleges for queer and trans students. Okay, looks like we have one question. Okay, so the question is, we're in the Midwest and I'm wondering if all of the CTCLs are on the Pride Index or if there's another place to check. That's a really good question. Wade, do you have any sense of this? I'm not sure if all CTCL schools would be on the Pride Index.
I don't. I'm relatively new to CTCL, but let me try to get a hold of a few people and see if I can come up with an answer.
Awesome, thanks. And here, I think.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I just want to add to the Pride Index. So they recently restructured. So I'm not sure if campuses are fully reflected. There was a time where their site was down for a few months and now it is back up. I know that the Campus Pride Index is still available and folks can now access it again. But yeah, I think just something to keep in mind is they may or may not be reflective of all the campus that have hopped on just because they were not operating for a few months.
Thanks, Amira. That's good to know. And Wade, perhaps you could just reply to the question in the Q&A box with your email address so that this participant can follow up. All right. Any other questions? Anything you're curious about? Okay. Well, I think at this point, unless anybody else has questions, we can go ahead and finish up. I just want to thank everybody who participated again for tuning in. I think, oh, hold on. No, just a thank you. But yeah, thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. I do want to say again for my part that I think it's unfortunate that this is a topic that just doesn't get talked about enough in the college admissions process. I think campuses are always so excited to talk about their physical improvements on campus, their outcomes for graduates, the supports that they have for all other kinds of things. But this is a topic that I was excited to get the chance to talk about, even if only briefly. So thanks everybody for listening in. Leave this contact information up again. If you're interested in getting in touch with any of us, please email our admissions offices. You can get in touch with any of the people in this presentation or with your designated admissions counselor at Evergreen State or at Hampshire. All right.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share one last slide with the audience and thank all of you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here to learn more about this. And thank you so much for the panelists and everything that you have shared. When you close your window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We appreciate your feedback. So if you could answer that survey, that would be great. Also, as I mentioned before, this is just one of many sessions being hosted as part of the CTCL virtual days. So be sure to sign up for other sessions. And in about a week, you'll find this session and all the other recordings available online as well. So come back and check that out. Thanks again to the presenters, and thank you all for attending. Have a great day.